Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to wait one more minute before we get started so people have a chance to jump on. Thank you. Okay, awesome. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. And as people jump on, will be my introduction. So hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar focused on getting non-degree pathways right, expanding opportunity, and ensuring quality. My name is Taylor Mag, and I'm the Director of Workforce Development Policy for PPI, where I cover this portfolio and lead the New Skills for a New Economy project. At PPI, we seek to develop and promote bold and innovative policy reforms that solve challenges facing the American people, our economy, and society. As part of our efforts through the New Skills for a New Economy project, we are working to elevate workforce development policies and practices that level the playing field for degree and non-degree workers, ensuring Americans who don't have college degrees have avenues for upward mobility. This conversation comes at a critical time. In the 21st century, education has become one of America's most significant markers of class privilege. People with bachelor's and advanced degrees have mostly prospered, while wages for those with less education have fallen. The downward mobility of working Americans without degrees is difficult to see, especially since most Americans still don't earn degrees. Today, 62% of adults have no bachelor's degree, and that number rises to 72% for Black adults and 79% for Hispanic adults. Additionally, as part of these percentages, 39 million Americans have some college but no degree, spending time and resources with little to show for it except student debt. Simultaneously, as our economy continues to evolve and college costs continue to rise, job seekers and workers are rethinking traditional post-secondary options due to affordability and alignment to career opportunities. While we know on average bachelor's degree confers higher lifetime earnings for those who have them, and we want to make sure these opportunities are more available for individuals, it's also clear that degree programs alone can't be the only option for economic success. Our country must develop strong alternatives that ensure strong returns for American workers, so our economy remains competitive and economic opportunity is shared. That is why our conversation today is so important. Our esteemed panel, who I'll introduce in a moment, will discuss their efforts to build understanding around and expand non-degree pathways, which include credit or non-credit options that tie more directly to work, including apprenticeships, micro-credentials, short-term, and other certificate programs, among many other things. Speakers will also discuss how to ensure quality in these programs and equitable outcomes. With that, before introducing our speakers, we're going to do a quick poll of the audience to see who's in the room with us today. Awesome. I'm going to introduce our panelists while the poll is happening, and I'm so excited for that today's webinar presents an opportunity to engage with these leaders at the forefront of the non-degree pathway space, working to expand these opportunities for today's students and workers. We have Yuencia Ding, Senior Manager of Amazon Career Choice Pathways. Welcome, Yuencia. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We have Shaylin Jotichi, Senior Program Manager at Burning Glass Institute and Senior Fellow at New America. Hi, Shaylin.
Thanks for having me, Taylor.
And last but definitely not least, we have Dr. Ian Rourke, Vice Chancellor of Workforce Development and Innovation at Pima Community College in Arizona. Hi, Ian.
Great. Thank you so much, Taylor. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you all. And so we're going to present the survey responses really quick so our speakers can see who's in the room with us before I dive in. Awesome. So we have a lot of educational providers with us. And I think we've had a few more folks join since we did the poll. So also feel free to chat us and introduce yourself. Great. All right, team, starting off with our first question, which is for everyone today. I know I just discussed the need for expanding non-degree pathways in the US. It's a pretty broad question, big one to get us started. Can you all expand on your efforts, the efforts you are championing to ensure these opportunities exist? And what solutions do you see having the most promise and impact today? Shaylin, I'm going to start with you first.
Sure, Taylor. Thanks so much. And thanks very much for the question. I'm representing two hats today. The first is with New America, where I was a researcher in the non-degree program space for about 3 years, really diving deep into the quality credentials realm. And I'm now with the Burning Glass Institute, which is an independent research organization that's harnessing the power of big data to inform the future of work and learning. So I'd like to share 2 examples from both hats with the audience here. With the New America perspective, we have just come off finishing a 3-year research and storytelling initiative called New Models for Career Preparation. This project was sponsored by the Lumina Foundation and really allowed us to explore what goes into creating a high quality non-degree workforce program at the community college level in particular. And what we produced as outputs for the project, which I'll share in the chat for attendees to peruse, are 3 practical briefs that aimed at helping community college leaders ensure high quality planning of non-degree workforce programs, high quality delivery, and high quality continuous improvement, using data to actually continuously improve these programs. And I have to give a shout out to our venerable fellow panelist, Ian here, who served on the advisory committee for the New Models effort. It wasn't a solo effort. We were really leaning on experts like Ian for the entire initiative. So I point the attendees to that resource and that set of resources as New America's most recent contribution to the non-degree space. And I also wanted to flag that there will be a follow-on opportunity, in particular for community colleges in the audience who would like to join New America in a phase 2 in actually adopting little p policy and practice changes at the institutional level to better offer these non-degree workforce programs. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up for the newsletter and get in touch. With Burning Glass Institute, the Institute is brand new. We've been around for about a year, but we're really looking to harness the power of labor market information data, public, proprietary, and private, to unlock data-driven pathways to quality jobs. In other words, how can we affirm that education providers and employers and learners are pursuing high quality non-degree pathways using data, identifying job postings, identifying skill profiles within individual workers, and using that as a resource to map out pathways. I'd like to point the audience to one resource from Burning Glass Institute, which is the American Opportunity Index. This project was made possible with support from the Schultz Foundation and produced in partnership with the Harvard Project on Workforce. This index allows us for the very first time to evaluate which companies in the Fortune 250 are doing right by workers in helping achieve concrete mobility based on big data. That ties in very concretely to our non-degree portfolio, because now we're looking to embed the American Opportunity Index framework within the non-degree credential space, and we'll have an exciting partnership we'll be announcing next month on that. So likewise, sign up for our newsletter and stay tuned on that front. So 2 initiatives from both hats, Taylor. Thank you.
Thanks, Shaylin. And I love the work that you've done at New America, and so excited to talk more about that with you today. And then also just so excited for your new role, and also Burning Glass's commitment to really ensuring we have strong labor market information that can help determine what these programs look like and are designed accordingly. So thank you so much. Next, we're going to go to Ian. Ian, I'll pass to you.
Thank you, Taylor, and thank you for the shout out. Shaylin, it was an honor to serve on the advisory council for the New Models for Career Preparation. And what's exciting in this day and age as a community college practitioner is that we get to be a part of developing these resources and these frameworks, but then we get to enact it at our own institutions and really start to see the results And so we've actually taken the term new models and have really employed that at Pima Community College to frame, if you will, how we classify our non-degree credentials that we offer. Equally, as a part of the Education Design Lab's Community College Growth Engine Fund cohort number 1, we were one of 6 colleges that really took the challenge to develop high quality micro pathways and implement those at scale within our institution. And so from that framework, we adopted the term new majority learner. And that was a great conversation internally because we used to refer to most of our students as non-traditional students. And the conversation from an equity lens was that we're really otherizing our own learners when we categorize them as something that's not or non. And they really define who we are as a comprehensive community college in the community that we serve. Most of our students are over 25 years old. Most of our students are working part or full time. Most of our learners have real life challenges from where they live to the resources that they don't have. So we've actually adopted the term for all of our non-degree models as new models for new majority learners, taking from the New America work and then taking from the Education Design Lab work, and really being intentional about how we design these programs with and through our full-time faculty and deans and academic divisions, not as non-credit work that we're buying from somebody else and white labeling. And so that was one thing that we really wanted to do to address the issue of whether or not these sorts of offerings are quality. At Pima, as I indicated, we've had an intentional focus on scaling micro pathways. We actually have definitions around what is a micro pathway versus just any short-term training that's not for credit. They include things such as full stackability through prior learning assessment into the parent certificate or degree. They must include industry-recognized certifications as well as 21st century learning skill certification, so that we're not only speaking to the technical acumen of the non-credit offering, but also what it can do with respect to things like cultural competency, teamwork, or critical thinking that employers are also looking for. And we wanted to actually document that our learners in short-term programs would be earning those. And then finally, all of the reason why we chose not for credit is for the no wrong door approach. We can stand up and offer our Pima Fast Track, which is our brand for our micro credentials, very quickly. The barriers to enrollment for a not for credit offering are extraordinarily low. And what we learned is that it was important because we wanted to be able to offer our micro pathways 1 month out from when we garnered learner interests, so that they didn't have to wait till the next semester or the next term. And I'll talk more about the results later in this interview, perhaps, or this panel, perhaps. The other models that we're focusing on, in addition to micro pathways, are the scaling up of all work-based learning. Our goal is that by 2025 in our strategic plan, that we will have some form of work-based learning from a job shadow all the way up to and including an apprenticeship in every single one of our programs of study, whether they be career and technical focused or even liberal arts or transfer focused. And so we're really working aggressively with our community to see where we can scale work-based learning across the board. And then finally, one of our other new models for new majority learners that we're also scaling institutionally are our iBest programs, where our adult education learners are enrolled in career and technical programs even before they've completed their GED equivalency or high school equivalency, so that they are, through ability to benefit, earning college credit prior to their high school equivalency, and then they can seamlessly keep enrolled, stay enrolled in our certificate and degree program. So again, micro pathways, work-based learning, including apprenticeship up to registered apprenticeship, and iBest are really the 3 primary models we're focusing on now, but we're also conceptualizing models for the future.
Ian, there's so many more follow-up questions I want to ask you. It's such exciting work happening at Pima. And I also just say, I really love the framing of how you're speaking about these students and the work. So new models for new majority learners. I think that's really powerful, especially as we know, our student population is changing and they look like your students. They are older, more diverse, already working, often caregivers. And so I think that's so important as we think about meeting their needs, as well as the needs of the regional economies that we're operating in. So UNC, I'm going to pass it to you next. Really excited to get an industry perspective in the conversation too. So I'll pass to you.
Thanks so much, Taylor. And it's absolutely inspiring hearing about the work that you all are doing, Shaylin and Ian. So very honored to be here. So right now, what I do is I lead the Pathways program within Amazon Career Choice. So first, I'm going to take a bit of a step back and talk about what the Career Choice program is within Amazon. It is essentially an education benefit and that offers skills training, professional certificates, language learning, and college degrees to support employees in their individual career success, whether that's at Amazon or elsewhere. Amazon actually created Career Choice all the way back in 2012. So we're 10 years old, now almost 11 years old as a program. And the purpose of it really is career advancement. It's about helping people to advance their careers, regardless of whether that is at Amazon or outside of Amazon, which is rather unique as far as these programs go. In 2020, or 2021, we also expanded the initial Pathways offering of helping people to get into new jobs to also offer English language learning across the United States, as well as college degrees, associate's degrees and bachelor's degrees. And so we support all of those now. But the work that has been around for the longest is this career pathways piece. And that's the work that I lead for Amazon. Within that, what we're really trying to do is help. Number one, our North Star is to help our employees get a new job. It's job placement, number one, first thing and last thing all day, every day is what we are focused on. And really to do that by helping them be competitive in the broader labor market. Again, not just for Amazon jobs, but for jobs in the broader labor market. Shaylin, speaking to some of your work. And to help increase their earnings and help them be able to put more food on the family on the table for their families. It's like fundamentally what we're here to do is to help create those life-changing experiences through education and through skills training. Within that, what we've done is defined a few different really high demand fields of study. So we work in administration and business services, we work in technology, we work in healthcare, mechanical and industrial systems, and transportation, because these are areas that we know that there's just a huge amount of labor market need for entry-level work. And Ian, to what you said about, I love the term new majority learner. All of our learners are part of that new majority learner. They are mostly full-time, but some part-time employed with Amazon. And so this is something that they have to juggle quite a bit to be able to take on and completing an educational program on top of their day-to-day work. And so being very conscious of that is a big piece of what we do. And so I guess to answer your question, Taylor, around like what are the solutions that have the most promise and impact, I think the thing that really inspires me and the key thing that I wish was used more is an education benefit program like this, because an education benefit program can often be just it's basically just a reimbursement, take whatever you want and hope for the best. And it treats education more as a consumable when it can really be a pathway to a better life. And it really can be something that is created intentionally that has great outcomes. And that I think is, it's more than just a benefit, I guess is what I would say.
I totally agree, Wency. And I just want to also say that I had the privilege of touring a Career Choice location in one of your facilities out in Seattle when I was there for work recently. And I just want to say what I also find really helpful is, like you mentioned, people are doing this on top of their jobs. And so the co-location of training and services, I think, is really important. So people don't have to leave. They get their instruction brought to them, which I think is really powerful. I also want to say that, like what you mentioned, UNC, that we were talking about some of the most popular programs for Amazon employees that were participating. And while some were very aligned to like the needs of Amazon's openings, there were also one, I remember there was a vet tech pathway that was really popular. And I was like, this is amazing that people it's not just offering what's like, hey, what we need in the company, but what do you need as an individual and how can we align your current skills to those outside of the workplace? So I just want to double down on that and say that I think that's not always the case for other employers. And I think that's pretty cool to see.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for that introduction. That was so wonderful. I know I put in the chat, and I know Shaylin was putting some resources in, but attendees, please feel free to ask questions throughout. We'll try to weave them in or respond in the chat. And we'll dive into our next question here. So Shaylin, I'm going to pass it to you. You talked a lot in your opening around the body of research you were leading and working on at New America, focusing on really getting non-degree programs right, looking at the quality of workforce education across post-secondary programs. Can you speak to the general findings of your research a bit more? What programs are you seeing that are increasingly popular? What are the major challenges to offering these programs for community colleges? And what are some innovations that excite you in this space?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Taylor. At the top level, the New Models for Career Preparation project was really aimed at complexity busting in this area of, we know that the demand for non-degree pathways to good jobs is on the rise. We also know that the supply of those pathways is on the rise, right? Credential Engine's most recent report has identified 1 million plus unique credentials. But when we study the outcomes that learners derive from these pathways, we find that the outcomes are very mixed. The truth is, a lot of non-degree paths lead to underemployment, unemployment, or employment in jobs that don't sustain a local living wage. Whether we use the MIT calculator or the United Ways calculator, that just bears out the fact. We also know that community colleges are at the heart of mobility in this country, an indispensable institution that really are at the heart of offering the non-degree many non-degree credentials in the post-secondary system. So the project really aimed to first build on the field's best understanding of what quality non-degree programs look like. We really didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We conducted more than 500 interviews with researchers, with academics, with employers, with educational institutions, and other peers in the space to really distill a 5-point framework for quality non-degree programs. And actually, that 5-point framework is listed in that URL that we put in the chat. So if folks are interested in perusing, that's available. And essentially it's labor market outcomes, meaning employment, but also the wages that workers get, as well as job quality measures. Do they get paid time off? Do they get insurance packages, safe working conditions? We embedded the job quality framework within our non-degree programs framework. We have stackable pathways, and this point I just wanted to call out in particular because it's absolutely the case that many learners just need a jump start via non-degree credential, and they may never need to obtain a degree to get a quality life and a quality career that suits their interest. However, I want to channel our venerable colleague Tony Carnevale here and just affirm that despite all the challenges of the degree-based paths to jobs, what we know from the data is that getting a college degree from a reputable institution in an in-demand program of study is still the best and most safest bet to the middle class. And I feel like that's a very important nuance to just keep in the back of our mind. And we kept that at the heart of our portfolio for our quality framework. So stackable pathways, we included completion rates. We included information about equity, because we believe that community colleges can help address a number of the occupational segregation woes in this country. And we believe that non-degree programs should at least make an occupation not less diverse, at least contribute to making it a little bit more diverse. So that was also part of our 5-point framework. The resources I mentioned, the 3 practical briefs oriented at college leaders, really meant to operationalize that framework in concrete terms. We point to many real-world, very specific examples from Ian's institution, from other institutions, that college leaders and policy leaders in states and in regions can replicate to ensure that they offer these high quality programs in the planning, delivery, and continuous improvement stages, respectively. In terms of some examples of programs that work really well, I really point to our briefs as a great collection of many of them, but I wanted to highlight just a couple that really excite me. I've been really excited about the potential of apprenticeship programs within the community college structure. New America has a large body of work on youth apprenticeships, which take the best of dual enrollment in high school and the best of an apprenticeship program. And upon graduation, many learners walk away with an associate's degree as well as career preparation for a job they can start day one that sustains the local living wage. Youth apprenticeships, I think, are very exciting in the non-degree context and the quality non-degree context at community colleges. The other model that I just put out, and I should say that all of these models are discussed in quite a lot of detail in the brief. So I mean to cover a lot of ground here, but to leave some breadcrumbs for the audience to follow. The second model I wanted to highlight are the use of the boot camp structure, but outside of the coding realm. What's been really fascinating, for example, at Mesa Community College, a partnership with Boeing, in 1 week, students can complete a boot camp in wire harnessing for a manufacturing occupation. And upon completion of that boot camp, receive an on-site interview with Boeing, 3 college credit hours. So folks are earning 3 college credit hours in 1 week at Mesa Community College. They earn an industry certification that's been vetted by the employer partner, Boeing in this case. And this is a $250 program that's fully reimbursed upon completion. This program at Mesa Community College is transforming equity in the state of Arizona. It was actually one of our new models for career preparation cohort members. So youth apprenticeships and boot camp structures outside of the coding realm. Not that the coding space isn't ripe for great boot camps, but I just think that we hear that often. So I wanted to just call out that there are some very exciting boot camp structures in the non-degree portfolios of colleges and universities that are worthy to look at in terms of effective models. Your last question, Taylor, regarding barriers, I'd like to point to another resource that we produced as part of this New Models project, and it's actually geared towards policymakers. So for those of you who in the audience were interested in sort of the policy fixes, whether at the state or federal level, we did produce a brief that encompassed some of the policy prescriptions that we recommend that could first we name and then alleviate the barriers that colleges face in offering quality non-degree workforce programs. So I just point the audience to that policy brief to identify some of the barriers. To name a few, they might be what we'd suspect. Financing this programs is incredibly complicated, especially for non-credit programs. Identifying data infrastructure at colleges to appropriately collect outcomes data and use data, whether labor market information or outcomes data, is a barrier. And then something that I think Ian's been very successful at Pima is aligning workforce development to economic development, sector-based strategies, contributing to tech-based economic development, thinking about how the tree of non-degree programs fit into the forest of economic mobility in a region. So we've identified barriers and policy prescriptions in those 3 areas and look forward to continuing the work in the next phase of the project. So those are some thoughts.
Shaylin, I think that's a perfect segue and also kind of elevates a few questions we had in the chat as you were speaking. One around financing, how we fund these programs and the role of the federal government, and the other around really understanding the outcomes of non-degree credentials and programs, because they often, if they are not woven into a credit pathway, we don't have the outcomes for them always. And so are we really understanding their impact, and are they being lumped together? So just flagging that for our panelists to kind of weave into responses as we continue. And I know we're going to get to that later in the discussion as well, some of those questions. So Ian, building off best practice and innovations happening on the ground, I'm going to you. Pima Community College, like Shaylin said, is at the forefront of innovation and workforce education, which your title and role emulates. Can you speak more to Pima's approaches to the non-degree space? How are you ensuring these opportunities exist? So maybe talking somewhat about that funding model and structure. How are you ensuring they're industry aligned while also aligning to the student and community needs? And I know you mentioned some major programs that you're working on. So would love for you to go more in depth there.
Thank you, Taylor. And really, we take to heart what Shaylin was speaking of with respect to honoring an intentional design that ensures quality outcomes. And so I hope I can get to some of that in my answer. How we approach workforce development at Pima Community College is that we serve as a horizontal that works with all of our academic divisions who are the verticals on the organizational chart. And that was really key structurally for us in terms of scaling all of these new models so that it's not operated by a small workforce unit that's traditionally like a mini college within a college and isolated onto its own. So everything that we do through workforce development is with and through academic divisions at our institution, and that's very intentional. I'll use the micro pathways or Pima Fast Track as the example. I've already spoke to some of the design principles, but really what we knew and we know is that yes, certificates and degrees, and ultimately the degree is going to be the coin of the realm with respect to upward mobility and family sustaining wages in our community, household sustaining wages. And there are a lot of barriers along the way. When we look at the labor market alignment of the non-degree but for credit offerings that permeate most community colleges at the certificate level, those programs, in all honesty, are oftentimes designed to be longer than they actually need to be for entry into the labor market because of a policy issue. How many of our own programs would we choose to offer at a not-for-credit level if there wasn't a 16 credit threshold in order for something to be federally financially aid eligible? So it's that Title IV threshold of 16 credits that really drives the length of what most programs are. And that's because from a fiscal perspective, we're incentivized to design programs that way. And from a needs perspective of our learners, we want them to be able to access those Title IV dollars. But what we looked at with many of our micro pathways, our Pima Fast Track was, okay, can we design it in a non-credit format so that it is actually just exactly as long as what is required for that first entry level position, and then hopefully through tuition reimbursement schema, such as Career Choice. And we are a great, we love Career Choice, and we love our local Amazon Career Choice regimen. They do send people to Pima Community College through Career Choice. And that is the ability then to have those learners come back with the employer to get the full certificate and the full degree. So the challenge we laid out to our faculty was, let's listen to our employers and what they're actually saying is the hiring point. Let's talk to our learners. And if they're leaving your certificate earlier than the completion point of the certificate and getting hired, that really is a signal for us of what the actual length of that program needs to be. Because we all know at the end of the day, every credential that we offer is a proxy for something else. And that is the marketable skills that employers are looking for in our learners and that our learners can bring to the market. And so we really went through an intentional design process coached by the Education Design Lab at the time to come up with a T profile. So every single one of our Pima Fast Tracks has a T profile where the vertical of the T are all of the technical skills that our own employers signified were the most important ones to get between an 8 and a 16-week time period for when they would hire somebody. And then the horizontal of the T were the 21st century learning skills I spoke about earlier. So obviously in an 8 to a 16-week program, you can't get all 8 of the 21st century learning skills that we offer. We're integrating all of those into our degrees. But at a minimum, you can get 1, possibly 2 in an 8 to a 16-week period. So we pressure tested every single one of our micro pathways with our employer partners prior to launch. We also did something else. We pressure tested it with student focus groups. So our learners got to get input into our micro pathway design. And we learned a lot from those conversations, and they were very, very candorous. What our learners told us is whether we're taking something that's offered on a non-credit basis, a short-term 4-credit basis, or a degree, we want a Pima faculty member, whether they're full-time or adjunct, we want it to be 100% fully aligned to the program we eventually want to go in, and we want the flexibility we need because our lives are complicated. And so what we did was not only focus then on the curriculum, so that's the micro pathway, shortest amount of education and training possible to get the highest entry level job possible, and then work with those employers to start bringing them back through tuition reimbursement and or apprenticeship regimen to complete the full certificate or degree. And we're already starting to see an uptake on that with our employer partners from our PIMA Fast Track regimen, particularly in fields like automotive technology, IT cybersecurity, and building construction technology, which define the majority of our PIMA Fast Track offerings at the moment, but we are adding more to that menu. So the lives are complicated. So what we also did was work with our public workforce system, which in Arizona is called Arizona at Work, and locally for us, it's Pima County. So it's Arizona at Work, Pima County, which is our American Job Centers. We actually have a great relationship with our county government and our job center. We have staff that are in the job centers that work for Pima Community College, but work alongside all of the providers, including the community-based organizations in our one-stop job center. And so we leveraged that relationship to ensure that every single learner who is enrolled in a micro pathway at Pima or Pima Fast Track are co-enrolled in the WIOA or WIOA public workforce system, even if they don't currently qualify for the resources. Now, our data tell us that was actually really key, both to sustainability for the model, because they're not for credit offerings, and so they're not federally financial aid eligible. 80% of the people who've enrolled in Pima Fast Track thus far are either unemployed or are underemployed, meaning less than half time. Think about that. In this labor market, that is an incredible data point. And what we found was we are reaching the labor force non-participants. So in Pima County, that's 42% of the population is a labor force non-participant. So they've been not working for quite a long period of time, and so they're not counted in the official current unemployment numbers, but we're bringing those individuals back to the workforce through these fast track models. So many of them do qualify for that form of public assistance through the Workforce Innovation Opportunities Act. We also had a generous donation and a grant, if you will, with the Bank of America Jobs Initiative. We were one of the 25 institutions that received around $1 million gift to that. What we did was soft fund some individuals, which we are now hard funding through college resources, that are called corporate and career navigators. These individuals are student services professionals that are trained to be on site and also to help navigate our fast track learners through the process from enrollment to employment to then enrollment in the parent certificate or degree upon completion of the fast track, and to work with the learners throughout the entire process. So they are more than an advisor, they're like super advisors. And then they also connect the learners to the community-based organizations and the resources in the job center in our Pima County One Stop. And finally, what we also did was carve out some dollars from that $1 million gift to start the largest scholarship fund through our Pima Foundation for non-credit programming. And we've since seen philanthropy to a level that we have not seen before for Pima Community College and Pima Foundation from local foundations and business and industry continuing to give to that scholarship fund and others so that we can fund learners in a sustainable fashion. And we have enough funding now without the shift at the federal level for short-term Pell, which I wanted to get in there real quick from a policy perspective. At the end of the day, that's ultimately the road to sustainability. But thanks to the generosity of Bank of America, HSL Foundation, and others, we now have sustainability for 4 or 5 years right now with respect to micro pathways.
Ian, there's so much I want to comment on. That was so robust, and I appreciate that response. I think that funding piece is so critical, and I think actually answers the question we had earlier of how our current federal financial aid system is designed to incentivize a certain amount of time in a seat. And I acknowledge that changes to that model are in the works now and are exciting to see modernization and thinking around what that could look like in the future. But also just, I think you are an impressive example of how to leverage other resources and encourage partnerships to fund these programs. I think that piece around partnering with your workforce board, it's like you're reading our attendees' mind. There was a question on how WIOA can be reformed and modernized and reauthorized too, to be more supportive in these conversations. So I think weaving in that partnership and how you're co-locating services is so critical to reach the needs of your students. And then of course, like you mentioned, the work you're doing with industry and ensuring that tuition reimbursement might be there and other avenues to fund these programs. And last thing I'll say, and I hope other panelists keep this in mind as we go to our last couple of questions, is Ian, I think you said it really well, is like this trade-off, right? It's yes, these programs are not eligible currently, most of them, for federal financial aid. However, it does, because of that, it does comes with increased flexibility for you to be really responsive to industry and really be able to raise these programs up in a short amount of time to meet the needs of your students as well as regional employers. And so I just want to call that out of how we can like make sure people's finances are better taken care of while also ensuring we keep that flexibility there. And I think UNC, I think that probably is a great segue to you and your perspective. So before we go there, I do want to just do one last survey for the group. Do you think learners, job seekers, and workers, regardless of age, understand all the post-secondary options that are available to them today? Just a quick yes or no to see what you all think. And while the poll is going, UNC, I'm going to go back to you. You come from the business perspective, but also have a robust background in education. I'm giving you a bit of a two-parter here. Can you talk about the economic moment for this work and why Amazon saw the need to develop career choice and other internal and external education and training programs? Additionally, how can training providers, whether public or private, better leverage labor market information, align to industry needs in their region, and ensure individuals understand all their options? I think Ian did a great job starting that off, talking about some of the navigation services he's providing and some of those critical employer partnerships. So I want to pass to you to expand based on your experience.
Thanks so much, Taylor, and agree. Ian, I was nodding vigorously as you were talking about a lot of the best practices that we've seen. So first off, in terms of this economic moment, you know, when we really zoom out at the biggest picture level, one of our newer leadership principles at Amazon is to strive to be Earth's best employer. And one of the ways in which we've committed to do that is through a pledge that we call our Upskilling 2025 pledge, which is a $1.2 billion commitment to provide skills training opportunities to 300,000 employees by 2025. Now, there are lots of different skills training programs within that pledge. Career Choice is the largest of them. As I mentioned before, it's been around for about 10 years. And over that time, we've served over 110,000 employees. Notably, 60,000 of those 110,000 were in 2022. So it's been a really busy past couple of years for us. So again, when we created Career Choice, it was really to think about how do we give the employees that we have the opportunity for higher pay and career growth, and then we've obviously since then expanded on it. But when we think about why that is, right, like for example, a recent study by Workplace Intelligence shows that 78% of employees are concerned that they lack the skills, and 71% are concerned they lack the education to actually advance their career. 58% of employees are afraid that their jobs have gone stale since the onset of the pandemic, and 70% feel unprepared for the future of work. So there's a lot of anxiety amongst the new majority learners about what it's going to take for them to be able to get ahead in the new economy. And then really importantly, 74% of millennial and Gen Z employees are likely to quit within the next year due to a lack of skills development opportunities. So career advancement is like the number one thing that employees want from their employer. And, you know, that is really one of the reasons why we have created this whole program focused on helping our employees to advance their careers. Someone recently said, you know, having upskilling programs and having education benefit programs like Career Choice that are intended to help people be able to advance their careers, it's really like the the new expectation of large employers, and that's certainly something that we've felt and seen, and I think we're quite proud to have been at the cutting edge of that 10 years ago, and have been able to develop a really robust and outcomes-driven, high-quality offering over that period of time. And 60,000 in a year was a lot. So that's like, I would say, the first part as far as like why it's important to do this kind of work. The second part is where I can absolutely nerd out with Shaylin on using labor market information. But first, before I get into how we use labor market data, like the first most important tenet for my team as we are thinking about how to create pathways is exactly as you said, Ian, like what do the employers actually need? What's actually being hired for? And so the way we do that is we'll actually look at the needs of our hiring partners. We have hiring partners both within Amazon businesses, as well as outside of Amazon, and hiring partners of external employers. And we'll actually take not only their job descriptions, but really get deep into what are the competencies, what are the things that they expect and need for someone to be able to walk in on day one and do, much to what you were saying before, Ian. And so like a great example of that would be, we have a partnership with Amazon Pharmacy, where Amazon Pharmacy needed to have more pharmacy technicians in 3 different locations in the US, really focusing on doing the back end work to be able to distribute that. We also have a partnership with CVS, where they also are looking for pharmacy technicians. There's just a need for more pharmacy technicians, full stop. So we know that that's an opportunity. And so we do look at the labor market data around pharmacy technicians, but frankly, we index higher on the fact that we know exactly how many job openings there are going to be for Amazon Pharmacy in X, Y, and Z markets, and that same information for CVS. Like that I guess customer obsession, for lack of a better term, that's a very Amazonian term to think about. Like how do we obsess over our customers? How do we make sure that we're serving the needs? That is the most important fundamental thing that we look at when we're deciding what pathway programs to offer, where, and how large. Where we don't have that level of employer-specific detail, we do look at labor market data, and we do a couple of different things to make that work for our particular use case. We'll look at the past to look at trends, to forecast annual openings, like really 2 years into the future. Because if you think about most of our programs, they're maybe 18 months long at most, at maximum, particularly to take into account the fact that we're talking about adding something to somebody's plate who they are already a working adult. They do have family obligations and commitments that, if they're working 40 hours a week, there's only so much more that they can do. And when they are making that level of sacrifice, there's only so long that you can expect them to be able to do that. And so, thinking of 2 years into the future, what's going to be in demand, and so we're taking historical data and forecasting that out. Particularly in light of COVID, it's really important to be able to think about think about that forecast, right? Where is this likely to be in a couple of years? Then we take that information and we actually adjust it for our population. So again, the folks that we serve, they're not going to necessarily come in with any prior experience in the field. So having little to no prior experience is really important. We can come up with the best possible training programs. We cannot make them suddenly have had 2 years of experience as a medical assistant. It's literally not possible. So we need to keep that in mind. We also then adjust it for the degree requirement, because we know that about 2/3 of our employees, or of our eligible employees, just like the broader US population, does not have a degree. And so with those things in mind, little to no prior experience, not necessarily having a post-secondary degree, okay, then what's the total addressable market of jobs that we can go after, that we can help our associates really target and go after? And then obviously we then adjust that for essentially like the way we think about it is almost like an expected market share capture. So we don't want to oversaturate any particular market. And so we'll say, think about what if Amazon were able to train all of the blank in a particular job market, it would probably make the local news. Like that's not realistic. So we have to think about what percentage of that addressable market can we actually capture. And so we do use that labor market data and have used it historically very intentionally to do that kind of forecasting and to decide where do we want to invest in certain programs to be able to really serve the needs of that community and to give our participants and give our employees the best possible chance that if they go into one of our programs, they are going to not only have a job waiting for them on the other end, but hopefully we'll have an Amazon pharmacy and a CVS competing for them and their talent, which is really what we aim to do. So that's a bit about how we've used that local labor market data in the past. I mean, this is obviously constantly being iterated, and we're always thinking and rethinking how best and most efficiently to do things. But it's just an example of it sounds complicated, but it's actually because of some of the great data sources that Burning Glass Institute is also very familiar with in Lightcast and things like that. It's doable. It's directional, but it's doable. And again, it's all about giving learners that best possible chance. And we have the tools and resources we need to at least do that.
Yuan-Xia, this was so helpful, and I think you're getting a lot of interaction from the chat right now. 1, 2 around like the 2 years looking in the future. That's really helpful perspective. And then what does that mean for other systems? Not only our folks representing post-secondary education, but our K-12 system and other partners. And I know I have a few questions from the chat that I'd like to elevate, but before we do that, I'm going to ask you all my final question. If we could respond speedier so we could get to 1 or 2 others in the chat, that would be great, but it's a big question, so no pressure at all, team. And I think this question also probably will get to some folks' thoughts in the chat as well. So we've covered a lot of ground today. And of course, with this topic, there's even more that we could discuss. And I wish we had, another 2 hours or 3 hours together. One last thing I want to touch on is the lack of understanding around non-degree pathways. I think this was brought up in the chat a couple times, and the lack of understanding specifically around their potential impact for individuals in the economy. What should policymakers keep in mind as they're looking to develop, expand, or scale non-degree programs for job seekers and workers to assure these opportunities are designed right, reach intended impact, supporting more equitable opportunities in our economy? So I'm giving you a lot of options here, but data outcomes that we talked about, investment, flexibility to meet regional demands, partnerships, and even student support. So I know there's a lot of directions you all could go, but would love to hear your final thoughts on the policy conversation. And Shaylin, I'm going to start with you.
Sure, Taylor. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to speak to some of the data gaps a little bit. And I should also say that the Non-Degree Credentials Research Network at George Washington University, which is Lumina funded, foundation funded, is a great resource to identify some of the key researchers working on building out these data connected systems for credential pathways. So I would say that a high priority policy need is to help institutions with capacity building in being able to use the data in the ways that Yuan-Xia, shared. Many colleges have one institutional research person, maybe 2 if they're lucky. And those leaders are busy tending to compliance and accreditation and reporting. The infrastructure at colleges to use labor market information data or even outcomes data for planning, delivering, and the continuous improvement of these programs is limited. And we need policy fixes to help with capacity building in a technical sense in terms of the actual infrastructure, modifying the student information system such that they can tie in more closely and be interoperable with LMI, but also in actually doing some skill development. We need to bring the upskilling revolution to our own institutions so that they could use this data. I'm going to share a couple of resources in the chat that speak to this in a little bit more detail, but that would be my policy topic, of which there are many.
Shaylin, thank you. And again, you're getting +1s in the chat right now. I think that's so important to talk about capacity building just generally, but also to ensure people understand how to use and leverage the data effectively. So I appreciate that point. Ian, going to go to you next.
Sure, I think so. I'm going to try to hit one of the questions in the chat related to K-12 with this as well. All that we can do to strengthen these pathways from a skills-based paradigm is great. But focusing on the skills and the gaps therein is not going to solve our labor market problems. I've always struggled a bit on how we approach the labor market from a supply and demand perspective, because I think it's the only market where the supply has a choice in the matter. And so when we frame it that way, it's really more about how do we inform our communities about these non-degree opportunities, and in a way that doesn't hierarchicalize them or otherize them, as we spoke about earlier in this conversation. I think that those states and regions that have some policy that really drive college and career exploration in the middle school is really an effective practice. I saw this firsthand. I was also a practitioner in K-12 before I came to the community college space and was a CTE director for a West Texas school district. And that's what we did. We worked with our community college and our university to have a citywide college and career exploration regimen that occurs on an annual basis for 7th and 8th graders as they start to sign up for their 9th grade career plans. I think for the adult population, it really comes down to effective marketing on the part of the provider. In our case with Pima Fast Track, we found that once we used pretty sophisticated but now readily accessible marketing techniques to reach certain communities, via geofencing and other ways, that we actually reached the people we were trying to reach with micro pathways quite effectively. So the last thing I would say from the policy perspective is something that you talked about earlier, Taylor, and that should we have short-term Pell, anything that we can do to retain the flexibility in the way in which we offer non-degree programs, and in particular new models for new majority learners would really be appreciated from a practitioner perspective.
I love that, Ian. You just hit on a lot of cylinders: funding, K-12 partnership and alignment, and even more. So I appreciate that. UNC, I'll go to you. What do you next?
Sure. So, I mean, broadly, like when we think about what it has taken to be able to drive high quality outcomes for our employees in our program, it's really 3 things that I want to shout from the rooftops. One is employer centricity, starting with demand and working backwards from that, either through hiring partners or through labor market data, as I've talked about. Second is program specificity. So it's not about the school, it's about the program, because programs that are actually tailored to what hiring partners actually want and need and validated with hiring managers, not corporate philanthropy, not government relations, those are the ones that are actually going to help to get results, and that are really catering to this new majority learner. You know, for our programs, we cap them at a maximum of 15 hours per week, because 15 hours plus 40 hours is a lot, as it is, and that, you know, it's something that it's intended for someone without a post-secondary degree or prior experience. So employer centricity, program specificity, and then the third, and possibly the most important, is to select schools intentionally based on their outcomes, their alignment to the workforce, and the integration of hiring partners in the curriculum. Some of the apprenticeship programs that others have talked about here, it's what we've seen is that the traditional model of like, you get educated, you complete, then you go get a job, like that doesn't quite work. What works is when the employers are really integrated into the program. And so again, this like employer centricity, program specificity, and then really selecting the programs and making sure that we're doing that quality assurance with those things in mind. And most importantly, I think to your question around what to keep in mind, it is that outcomes aspect part of it. Like a lot of what I've seen in the chat in this discussion has been, well, what if the outcomes aren't as good? And the truth is that I know that non-degree programs can demonstrate just as high, if not higher outcomes when you're talking about job placement as a North Star. If job placement is the goal and you're able to be agnostic to credit bearing or non-credit bearing, you're able to be agnostic about public versus private, like how you get to the goal is where the creativity really comes in. But if the goal is to help people get jobs and make more money, then we don't have data around that. We just don't. There isn't a college scorecard for non-degree programs. And so what is in the college scorecard and what a lot of the data that is out there is based on Title IV. And as we discussed in this call, like that's not actually applicable to most of the things that we're talking about. That lack of information, that lack of compiled, aggregated, transparent, non-degree programmatic outcomes is the biggest problem, because it prevents us from doing the quality assurance that is necessary to give students, consumers, taxpayers, the confidence that these programs really can help change people's lives and for the better, and that there really are some that are incredibly high quality, some that are incredibly strong at helping the new majority learner to cross that threshold and to get that new job and to start their new career. So I just want to say that like what's out there isn't enough, and that's really where there's the biggest gap is in that outcomes data, so that we can do this work at a systematic level.
Nancy, I think that's such a great way to end it. I think your point that these programs have such potential and impact, but we need to understand more about them and have the data there to share is so important, to be able to share those successes and stories. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Again, apologies we couldn't get to more questions in the chat. I wish we, like I said, had way more hours together this afternoon. But this was a great first conversation. I hope to have many more with these three wonderful experts who are driving better equity, stronger outcomes in the non-degree pathway space. I appreciate you all, and thanks for being here today.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.